This is a Fox News alert. Major breaking news and huge developments tonight. According to two stunning reports, American spies paid $100,000 to a shadowy Russian last year in exchange for stolen NSA documents and for so-called compromising material on President Trump. So in other words, were American deep state spies potentially paying Russians for Trump dirt? Now, we're going to break down all the new details tonight. And the media distorts why the Democrats' memo was not released late last week. Now, liberals set the trap for the Trump administration by including sources and methods. Only problem for them? Well, the president didn't fall for this. Plus, senators raising questions tonight about former Obama National Security Advisor Susan Rice over an email she sent to herself on Trump's inauguration day. Also new tonight, the liberal mainstream media fawning over the sister of the murdering dictator Kim Jong-un at the Olympics while criticizing Vice President Mike Pence. We're going to show you that video and explain to the brain-dead media why they shouldn't be praising a rogue regime that tortures and kills people in prison camps, and starves their own children. Also, remember the plane load, $1.7 billion in cash and other currencies that the Obama administration gave to Iran? Well, the Washington Times tonight reporting that some of that money can be traced back to terrorist groups like Hezbollah. We'll cover that and much more in tonight's Breaking News Opening Monologue. All right, before we get into all the news we have tonight, on this show, we're never going to forget that Hillary Clinton, we now know, rigged the primary against Bernie Sanders. We're not going to forget that her exoneration was written before the investigation was even near complete on the private email server. We're not going to forget that a phony dossier bought and paid for by Hillary Clinton with Russian lies was used to get a FISA court warrant against Carter Page, even though the FBI never verified the information. On this show, we're going to stay on this story until we get justice. Now on to tonight's developments. Now we have two shocking reports, both from the New York Times and The Intercept. They are raising serious questions this hour about just how far the deep state will go to damage President Trump. Now, according to these reports, American spies met last year with an unnamed Russian who was thought to have ties to Russian intelligence. Now, the American officials were interested in recovering powerful cyber tools that had been hacked, but this Russian person quickly claimed to have, quote, compromising material on President Trump. Now, the New York Times does report that the American intelligence officials say they were only interested in retrieving the NSA cyber weapons, but the Russian was eagerly pushing anti-Trump information, which included 15-second video of an American businessman in a room talking to two women. And according to the Times, there was no way to verify who was in that video, and the American spies thought it wasn't credible. Now, the Times reports that the American officials eventually agreed to pay this shadowy Russian $100,000. But instead of turning over NSA hacking tools, he gave them, quote, unverified and possibly fabricated information involving Mr. Trump and others, including bank records, emails, and purported Russian intelligence data. Now, the $100,000 was supposed to be the first installment of $1 million that they were going to pay out, which was down from $10 million that the Russian originally was asking for. Now, the Times also notes that since the phony anti-Trump dossier, authored by Christopher Steele, came out last year, there have been at least 4 Russians with espionage connections, and they have tried to sell damaging information to political operatives, spies, and investigators. And also, according to the Times, remember Cody Shearer, longtime Clinton ally, who would write a second fake news dossier, quote, he has been crisscrossing Eastern Europe for more than 6 months to secure the purported compromat, which means compromising material, from a different Russian. So there's a lot of information to take in here. Let me try and connect these dots for you. U.S. intelligence officials paying $100,000 to a Russian with purported ties to Moscow ends up giving them unverified, possibly fabricated anti-Trump information. Now, where that information is, who has that information, we don't know. Now, the CIA tonight is strongly denying the information being reported by the New York Times and The Intercept. And the NSA reportedly declined to provide a comment to The Intercept. And on top of all of this, we're also learning that at least 4 other Russians have been shopping around compromising information. By the way, I thought they liked Trump. And longtime Clinton friend Cody Shearer is literally going all over Europe trying to dig up damaging dirt about President Trump from a Russian. Here's what it all means tonight. Russia is doing everything they can do to spread lies about President Trump, and Democrats are more than happy to accept it because they'll do anything to damage the president. And I thought this was the horrible thing to do. I thought we spent a year investigating collusion with the Russians. But we have discovered real collusion. And these new reports are offering up even more evidence that we hadn't seen before. Now, we already know that Hillary Clinton and the DNC, they paid over, what, $12 million to Fusion GPS. They hired the former British spy, Christopher Steele. He created that dossier filled with Russian government lies and propaganda, salacious material. Well, Clinton did that with what intention? She wanted to impact the general election. It didn't matter if it was truthful or not. And those two memos, as they're uncovering here, the FBI and DOJ, then they used the salacious, unverified dossier of Christopher Steele to get a warrant to spy on the Trump campaign and their associate Carter Page. And according to the memos, the dossier made up the bulk. Remember, the Grassley and Graham memo made up the bulk of the FISA application. And then the FBI, James Comey, they never bothered to verify it. And then they used it, and they go before a FISA court in an effort to spy on Carter Page and the Trump campaign. They never said Hillary Clinton bought and paid for it. And it's not verified, as they should have. And as we told you about on Friday, Politico is reporting that former White House chief strategist Steve Bannon, he may have been picked up by FBI surveillance while Carter Page was being spied on. And a State Department official actually admitted in an op-ed that he was sharing anti-Trump opposition research from friends of the Clintons with the dossier creator, Christopher Steele. This is all an unprecedented abuse of power. The Constitution is being shredded before your eyes. Civil liberties are being severely violated. Remember the Fourth Amendment protection against unreasonable search and seizure? And yes, in spite of what the media is telling you and downplaying, it is bigger than Watergate. And as we have been reporting, a lot more information is coming out every day. Now, take a look at the side of your screen. Think this is a small scandal? So far, 14 officials at the DOJ and the FBI have either been fired, reassigned, demoted, or quit. They want to get out of there. And there are a lot of others who are involved in what is being exposed. But simply being moved around the bureaucracy, that's not going to be good enough. That's not going to solve the problems. All of these officials, they all need to be investigated, and those that are guilty, prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law so this never happens again. Also new tonight, Senator Grassley and Senator Graham of the Senate Judiciary Committee, they're now demanding answers from President Obama's former national security advisor, Susan Rice. Now, they discovered a partially unclassified email that she actually sent to herself on President Trump's inauguration day. And Rice, through this email, appears to document a January 5th, 2017, Oval Office meeting between President Obama, former FBI Director James Comey, and former Deputy Attorney General Sally Yates regarding Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election. In her email, Rice notes that President Obama apparently told Comey and others to handle things, quote, by the book. Really? And Grassley and Graham are struck by the context and the timing of this email, and they have now sent out a series of questions for Rice to answer by February 22nd. Now, while Republican memos are providing damning facts and evidence about deep state government corruption, well, the Democrats, they're desperately trying to cover up the truth. They never wanted you to see this information, and they're trying to change the narrative. They put out their own counter memo, and on Friday, President Trump sent the Democrats' memo back to the House Intelligence Committee with a letter explaining why. Because it contained classified sources and methods that could jeopardize national security. And, of course, the media predictably ignored all of these facts, and they're attacking President Trump for being anti-transparency. But, of course, we know they're lying. The Democrats were clearly setting a trap for the president. They wanted him to release classified material about sources and methods. The White House didn't fall into the trap, and the president wants to release the memo. Democrats, they have to make the necessary edits, not the president. Now, remember, the Republican memo did not contain classified information. It did not reveal sources and methods. So why can't the Democrats play by the same rules? Because the facts aren't on their side. And for rigid left-wingers in this country and members of the media that are complicit, that are claiming this is, all a plan to block the Democratic memo, not at all. I say release that memo. They clearly didn't read the White House letter or listen to the House Intelligence Committee chair, Devin Nunes. And Nunes is saying, like we're saying, that he wants the memo released. I want it released. Take a look.
We actually want the Democratic memo out. We think it's ridiculous on the face of it. We think it's very political about how they attack myself. They attack Chairman Gowdy. They turn Carter Page into some super secret Russian spy. They talk about how Christopher Steele is a really, really good source when we know that he lied to the FBI. So we want this out. We don't know why they're not in this weekend redacting it so that we can get it back to the White House so the president can declassify it.
Right, there you have it. For Republicans, this whole issue has been about truth and transparency. And for Democrats, the left-wing media, it's all about playing politics. We're going to have more on that in a moment. But first, the Winter Olympics in South Korea began late last week, but not without some controversy. Now, after Friday's opening ceremony, well, members of the echo chamber swung into full gear to heap praise on a woman named Kim Yo-jong, who just happens to be the director of propaganda for the rogue dictatorship in North Korea, and the sister of one of the most brutal, oppressive dictators in modern history, Kim Jong-un. That didn't stop the mainstream media from fawning all over Kim Yo-jong for showing up at the opening ceremony, shaking hands with the South Korean president, and calmly watching the opening procession. CNN, fake news, the whole network, they ran this headline, quote, "Kim Jong-un's sister is stealing the show at the Winter Olympics." And Reuters led with the caption, quote, "North Korea heads for diplomacy gold medal at Olympics." And not to be outdone, the New York Times writes, "Kim Jong-un's sister turns on the charm, taking Pence's spotlight." And the New York Times also tweets, "Without a word, only flashing smiles, Kim Jong-un's sister outflanked Vice President Mike Pence in diplomacy." And the Washington Post, not to be outdone, called Kim Yo-jong the Ivanka Trump of North Korea. And of course, this glowing coverage continued on TV. Take a look.
Athletes from the North and South Korea marching on the same team, waving reunification flags. More history just a few seats away. Kim Jong-un's sister right there behind the vice president. She's on hand for the Olympics as well.
In a historic moment, South Korean President Moon Jae-in shook the hand of Kim Yo-jong, the sister of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un.
The sister of Kim Jong-un shook hands warmly with the South Korean president in the VIP box at the Olympic opening ceremonies.
But North Korea is stealing much of the limelight. Kim Jong-un's sister landed at Incheon Airport earlier today.
3 days of the world's media running after the sister of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. And still, we know very little about the woman who has stolen the headlines at the Pyeongchang Winter Olympics.
All right, if that's not bad enough, the media also goes after Vice President Mike Pence for refusing to shake her hand in the VIP box. We'll have more on that with Joe Concha later in the show. But take a step back and remember, the woman that the media is applauding is the director of propaganda for a government that has, let's see, murdered around 400,000 political prisoners in what some are calling concentration camps. And these camps have been in existence since 1982. And as we speak, between 80,000 and 120,000 people are still imprisoned in those camps, including men, women, and even children. And according to a 2014 United Nations report, well over 200,000 people from around the world have simply disappeared, never to be seen again inside of North Korea. And don't forget, there are 3 Americans currently being held hostage in that rogue state. Now, the Kim Jong-un regime has also been responsible for the recent death of the American Otto Warmbier, who was imprisoned and sentenced to hard labor for allegedly stealing a poster. But last but not least, millions of people are currently starving inside of North Korea. Roughly 30% of their population starving. All while this little despot, Kim Jong-un, lives a life of luxury and his sister enjoys a prime seat at the opening games of this year's Winter Olympics. And despite all of this, the mainstream media continues to praise Kim Yo-jong. Now, it's pretty disgraceful, but we shouldn't be surprised. It was the same mainstream media that praised, of course, President Clinton for saying his nuclear agreement with North Korea. That's a good deal for the American people. They'll never get nukes. Well, that didn't work out. And if you don't learn from the past, you're doomed to repeat it. And that's why the media is a sad and despicable broken record. And finally tonight, speaking of bad plans, remember the plane loads of $1.7 billion in cash and other currencies the Obama administration stupidly gave the Iranian mullahs chanting death to America in Tehran? Well, now we're finding out that the rogue regime is using a lot of that money. Washington Times reporting that the U.S. government has now been able to trace some of the money given to Iran and determine that Tehran is using it to fund the terrorist group Hezbollah. Big shocker. Here with reaction, former deputy assistant to the president, Fox News national security strategist Sebastian Gorka, and former U.S. ambassador to the UN, Fox News contributor John Bolton. Dr. Gorka, I look at this and I say, okay, it's the same theme. So there's a compulsion on the left to want to suck up to the world's worst dictators. Why? Why do they think that works?
Look, it's nothing new. This is what the New York Times was doing with Walter Duranty in the 1920s and 30s, who was singing the praises of the Soviet Union as Stalin was killing millions of people. I mean, this is a regime. I mean, you pointed out, this is the person who runs propaganda for a Stalinist regime that's starving its own people. Would CNN have celebrated Goebbels? Would they have celebrated the propaganda machine of Hitler's Third Reich? It's outrageous. The lack of self-awareness of the left-wing media is incredible. You have one of the most honorable men in the world, Vice President Mike Pence, sitting there doing what is right morally, and they want to focus on a key member of an evil, evil dictatorship. It's beyond the pale, Sean.
You know, you look at these quotes. I mean, CNN ambassador, going out there, Kim Jong-un's sisters stealing the show at the Winter Olympics. And the New York Times, without a word and only flashing smiles, Kim Jong-un's sister outflanks Vice President Pence in diplomacy. Where's this desire to just worship the propaganda minister of North Korea with their horrific human rights record? Well, I thought the left cared about human rights.
Only when it suits them. And, it's more than the bias. It's their incompetence. It's their lack of knowledge, their unwillingness to look, their lack of appreciation for the fact that the North Korean propaganda machine has done all this before. They've had unified Korean teams march in 3 previous Olympics. They've had invitations in 2 intra-Korean summits years ago in 2000 and 2007. All of this propaganda, of which the current Olympic charade is part, did absolutely nothing to slow down the North Korean nuclear weapons and ballistic missile programs. And that's what the current charade is doing. The media are stenographers for the North Koreans, and their lack of historical knowledge or appreciation shows they've got the attention span of fruit flies.
I still, for the life of me, have a hard time understanding why people think bribing people that threaten to destroy you, death to America, death to Israel, burn the Israeli flag, burn the American flag. Oh, who thinks it's a good idea to send in cargo planes full of cash and currency, and that somehow the mullahs will like us in Iran, or the dictators in North Korea will somehow change their ways, Dr. Gorka?
Sean, there's a very simple answer to all of this. Why do they do this? Because these people don't love America. Why did these people excuse everything Obama did for 8 years as he went on an apology tour?
I don't think that's it. I think they actually think that if you kiss their ring and bow before them, that they will like you. And as history has proven, that doesn't work.
But why would you do that with a regime that is evil? There's a very important point here that we need to appreciate, that the left-wing media always helps our enemies. They don't support Israel, our best friend in the Middle East. They support Iran. Think about that. They don't support our great longtime allies. They support those who are anti-American, whether it's North Korea, whether it's Iran, or whether it's China. This is, if you don't like America, then the media will love you. It's that simple.
Ambassador Bolton, because Donald Trump has taken a hard line. Little rocket man, I have a bigger button on my desk, and ours actually works, which I think is hilarious, but it also sends a strong message. Do you think it had any impact on Kim Jong-un and his desire to be in these Olympics, potential talks with South Korea? Does peace through strength, did it have any impact here?
I think it's had an enormous impact, because I think for the first time, certainly in 8 years, but really for the first time significantly in 25 years of our efforts to stop North Korea from getting deliverable nuclear weapons, I think they believe that when Donald Trump says all options are on the table, he really means it. And for North Korea, this is a very critical period. It is for us, too, because the North is, as CIA Director Mike Pompeo said, within a handful of months of having this deliverable nuclear weapons capability. So I think what the North was trying to do was throw up a propaganda screen, have people ooh and ah over the sister, look at the joint women's hockey team for the Koreans, and forget the uranium centrifuge is still spinning and the rocket scientists still working, in hopes they can get across that finish line before we can do anything about it.
Dr. Gorka, I think the Washington Post had one of my favorites, the Ivanka Trump of North Korea. Did they inadvertently suggest that that Ivanka Trump is good for the country and a bit of a star? It wasn't on purpose, I'm sure.
No, I mean, the great irony is that if this were really an analogy with Ivanka Trump, they would have attacked this woman, just as they've attacked everybody in the president's family since he became the president. So, no, they're
nicer to the propaganda minister than the president's daughter. That's probably a good point.
Yeah, think about it.
Right.
Nice. The left-wing media in the last week has supported the dictatorship in North Korea, given them free propaganda. This is a regime that has labor camps, Sean.
All right, well said. Thank you both. Sad but true. News gets harder every day. When we come back, Ed Henry has a live report on the scary situation involving President Trump's daughter-in-law. White powder was sent to her home earlier today, and much more as we continue straight ahead.
And live from America's News headquarters, I'm Ed Henry. The NYPD and the Secret Service are investigating tonight after President Trump's daughter-in-law received a letter containing a white powder. Police say the powder is not considered dangerous. Vanessa Trump was hospitalized as a precaution. Donald Trump Jr. reacted to the incident, tweeting, "Thankful Vanessa and my children are safe and unharmed after the incredibly scary situation that occurred this morning." Truly disgusting that certain individuals choose to express their opposing views with such disturbing behavior. The Senate, meanwhile, voting to begin debate on immigration. Many Republicans back President Trump's plan to offer possible citizenship to nearly 2 million so-called dreamers, $25 billion for security and the border wall. Democrats also want citizenship for those dreamers, but disagree with key parts of the plan. I'm Ed Henry in Washington. Now back to Hannity. For all your headlines, log on to foxnews.com.
All right, in what might be the most absurd anti-Trump coverage in recent memory, the mainstream media fawning over the North Korean minister of propaganda, Kim Jong-un's sister, all while trashing Vice President Mike Pence following the Winter Olympics opening ceremony. Take a look.
VP Mike Pence was in the stands at the Olympics, where he seemed to be making a silent protest by remaining seated when North and South Korean athletes entered the stadium under the Korean unification flag.
I thought that Mike Pence said that it was inappropriate to make political statements at sporting events.
If you're in Korea, you need to stand up. You need to stand up and show respect.
Not standing during the ceremony was very odd.
It was a clumsy moment. If we had actually people working in the State Department, I'm sure they could have given Mike Pence more effective instructions.
Again, this is certainly a propaganda win, nonetheless, for North Korea to have these images showing two top-level officials sitting with South Korea's President Moon Jae-in and the Vice President just a short distance away.
All right, here with reaction, the author of the brand new book, The Faith of Donald J. Trump, a spiritual biography, David Brody, also with us tonight, The Hill's Joe Concha. You know, Joe, they want to believe, they want to love, they want to suck up. The evidence is overwhelming. This is a brutal, murdering dictatorship that was recently threatening the United States, the continental United States, with nukes, threatening and firing missiles over Japan, threatening Guam, and instability everywhere. Why this desire to suck up and kiss the ring of these dictators?
Well, don't forget, Sean, also that North Korea has a population of 25 million. UN report last year shows that 18 million people there don't have enough food. And remember Otto Warmbier, a U.S. citizen who was tortured within an inch of his life and died last June. You remember how they used to torture him? And this is according to Fred Warmbier. They actually removed his teeth, and I doubt that a local was administered, and then placed them back in his mouth in different parts where they shouldn't be. And now we're seeing, as you mentioned in your last segment, story after story, headline after headline, Kim Jong-un's sister turns on the charm, takes Pence's spotlight. I'm sure if this was Joe Biden and the previous administration, that wouldn't happen. And the running joke on social social media this weekend, and it was very effective. It was, if this were 1936, the headlines would be, Eva Braun steals spotlight at Munich Olympics. It's essentially saying the same thing.
You know, this is interesting, David, because you wrote a spiritual biography of Donald Trump, and I'm sure those that maybe don't like Donald Trump's tweets or he's had a controversial life, they may not understand it. But one thing's certain, he's not going to make a deal with two-bit dictators that are threatening to destroy America, be it the mullahs in Iran, or try and bribe them, or bribe the North Korean dictators. That's a certain understanding, fundamental understanding of good versus evil, isn't it?
Absolutely, Sean. And I will also say that, look, ultimately what this is about is that his base knows that he's not going to cut that deal. And also independents and Democrats that are a part of that base know he's not going to cut that deal. And so that is a big deal in Donald Trump land. You're right. I wrote that book, The Faith of Donald Trump, out today, by the way, Sean. And I will just tell you that there is a whole different side that the media just doesn't get with him. And I think it's important. You'll see a lot of law and order. North Korea is a good example of that, but there's a compassionate side to him as well, and we've got stories in the book to tell about it.
But the left, they like to say that they have this, a more spiritual sort of superiority and a monopoly on compassion for the poor, the disadvantaged, et cetera, et cetera. We have, as Joe pointed out, how many millions of North Koreans are starving as he throws all this money into a nuclear program so he can destroy the rest of the world, or at least threaten to destroy?
Well, and I also think what's interesting here, Sean, is that when they're talking about Ivanka, right, they're the Ivanka of North Korea and the Ivanka of America. I mean, the idea that they would put elegance in all of this, in other words, this idea that there's an elegant sister in North Korea, I mean, really is just a slap in the face. But beyond that, CNN has really gone off the rails here. I mean, they've had a problem since day one.
You just figuring that out, David?
Yeah, well, this just in. Do we have a, can we put a chyron at the bottom of the screen?
Fox News alert.
Yeah, Fox News alert, CNN off the rails, catch it here. But look, I mean, even at the National Prayer Breakfast the other day, they were talking about Russians, triple the amount at the National Prayer Breakfast, like they were going to take over and infiltrate the National Prayer Breakfast. It was shameful.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And Joe, I guess this makes you a lot different than some of your media critic colleagues out there. They claim to have a monopoly of compassion, but it looks like conservatives seem to understand that you can't bribe dictators, and sucking up to those that are abusing human rights on a daily basis are not worth being friends with, and that the only answer or antidote is strength.
No, the old proverb here in terms of media, Sean, is the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And in this case this weekend, you know, it wasn't only Trump supporters that weren't just rolling their eyes at this, but actually angry, but I saw plenty of pushback from independents, Democrats, because they saw an American press that was glamorizing a woman who is the director of propaganda and agitation. The Soviets called it agitprop, and it's the most oppressive regime on earth. We've talked about this, but the New York Times CEO, Mark Thompson, he was on CNBC today defending the coverage. He said, quote, "No reader could think for a second that the Times doesn't understand about human rights and abuses." Okay, then you have to start working on your headlines, because 2/3 of Americans now, and I don't know if your viewers know this, Sean, 2/3 of Americans get their news from social media, Twitter and Facebook. And they probably do what you and I do probably sometimes. You scroll through, you stop at a headline, you see and you say, wow, I can't believe it. Kim Jong-un's sister outflanked Pence on the diplomacy front. You read a little blurb and you move on. You don't actually read the story that may talk about those oppressive regimes and the horrors and the murders. But you know what? You better work on your headlines and make it more accurate, because people aren't reading the stories. They're just looking at headlines, and it's very dangerous. Context is not added in those situations.
All right. Thank you both. Good luck with your book, David. We appreciate you being with us, and I know you had a lot of interviews with the president to get that book together. When we come back, the latest on Deep State Gate, the media giving President Obama a free pass on all this government surveillance abuse. We won't do that on this show. Monica Crowley, Tom Fitton, Pam Bondi, all coming up straight ahead with the latest developments. Monica Crowley, she has a powerful new op-ed out today in The Hill entitled "Federal Abuses on Obama's Watch Represent a Growing Blight on His Legacy." Now, Monica writes, quote, "In all of the discussions about the political weaponization of the Department of Justice and the FBI, alleged corruption at the highest echelons of those agencies, and serial abuse of the secret FISA process surrounding the 2016 election, one name has been conspicuously absent: President Barack Obama." Here now with reaction, senior fellow at the London Center for Policy Research, Monica Crowley, Judicial Watch's President Tom Fitton, and Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi. Monica, let's start with this, because yeah, it's all true, isn't it? That she rigged the primary. Pam can answer this later, but I've never heard of an exoneration months before interviewing the main people in an investigation. That allows her to continue. She pays for Russian government, Russian propaganda. That gets used for a FISA warrant. They don't tell the FISA judge she bought and paid for it, and then it's not verified. That's all in order to disrupt the 2016 election. How does this get to Obama? I think the Susan Rice memo, the Grassley-Graham memo, might be giving us some insight.
Yeah, you know, Sean, we've been talking about the two sort of surface things going on here and the purpose of the weaponization of the DOJ and the FBI in the Obama administration. One was to protect Hillary Clinton from prosecution and make sure she was, in fact, the candidate because she was joined at the hip to Obama. Remember the Benghazi attack. Remember the knowing and repeated communications over her server and by her private email account. So they had to protect her in order to protect President Obama. If she were guilty of committing felonies, then so was he. So they had to insulate her. And the other part of it is, of course, they hated Donald Trump, so they wanted to derail him. But nobody is asking the bigger question as to why. And that's what I tried to get across in this column today at The Hill, Sean, which is that Barack Obama essentially fulfilled the long-held leftist ambition of changing the nation on a leftward trajectory, what Obama himself called the fundamental transformation of the nation.
Well, he had 8 years.
There was no way, right, and there was no way that he and his team and the Clinton squad also was going to allow those 8 Obama years of leftist achievements be reversed by none other than Donald Trump.
Pam, there's zero doubt the evidence in the email server. I've listed them enough times on this program that multiple felonies were committed. But then you have the FBI director and this Trump-hating higher-up individual, Peter Strzok, and his mistress, and then Andrew McCabe. They're talking about insurance policies. So the fix is in.
Right.
You're a prosecutor. If you ever exonerated or begin an exoneration letter months before you interview the key people in the investigation, it never made sense. And then that all leads to her staying in the race, paying for the Russian lies, and then you go to a FISA court and you withhold information. Isn't that lying by omission to a court?
Sean, it's more than lying by omission. When they go for a FISA warrant, they have to swear under oath that the facts they're presenting the judge are true. And I can't believe that the judge hasn't pulled them back already into court to undo what's happened. It's ridiculous. And a FISA warrant, that's one of the most important things we do as prosecutors because you are invading someone's privacy. You are wiretapping their phones. You are listening to everything they do. That's why that information has to be pure and clean.
The Grassley-Graham memo says that the dossier was the bulk of information evidence. And so they hand this over. Now, 3 months later, you got James Comey saying to Trump it's not verified and salacious. But it's only a footnote, as we understand it, to the FISA court. It may have political origins. They knew Hillary bought it. They know she paid for it. They knew it was even probably not verified, but they didn't tell the judge.
Yeah.
What should happen now?
Well, the judge needs to bring them back before him. They should all be held in contempt at very minimum for bringing false information to a judge. That's more than lying by omission. They did not give the judge all the facts. I believe it was very falsified what they did. It needs to go back before the judge and it needs to be wiped out. And everything you always hear say fruit of the poisonous tree, it's a very basic law school principle. But everything that came out of that warrant is the fruit of a poisonous tree.
Would that mean General Flynn's guilty plea?
Absolutely.
Out the window?
Everything
100%.
should be. Everything. And I really cannot believe it hasn't been brought back before the judge now that you've revealed and Fox and everyone has revealed all of these facts.
The memo's there. Tom Fitton, I did see the president tweeting you this weekend. Congratulations. But more importantly, you're digging deep to get. Will we ever get a look at how bad this FISA memo was, or the arguments made before the court? Is that something maybe in redacted form we could look at to see what they purposely did not tell this judge that they knew at the time?
Well, we sued for them. There are these dueling memos. The Democrats are going to have their memo eventually come out. And why is it we're relying on this summary document? Let's get the underlying information. I know Nunes is asking for it. We've sued in court for it. And I've told the White House that they should take this approach of extreme transparency on this Russiagate. It does nothing to protect the president from this illicit activity against him, and it protects people like Barack Obama and the Justice Department and the FBI that was misused to target President Trump.
Do you think
Barack Obama, the dossier is central to the Russia collusion theory. It's collapsing, and if it was central to Russia collusion theory, we have reports today, quickly, Sean, Barack Obama was given the dossier. He was given the dossier. What did he know, and why hasn't he been questioned about it?
Well, that's a good point. And the Grassley-Graham letter to Rice today, Monica Crowley, they want to know what was talked about on January 5th and what Susan Rice, a note to self, on just the hours before they leave the White House. Doesn't that seem a little odd, that letter that she's sending out?
Well, yeah, but I mean, look, the idea is shown that any of these people in the executive branch under President Obama, the branch he oversaw, that any of these people, Comey, Lynch, McCabe, the list goes on, Strzok, Page, or that any of these people freelanced any of this without at least the tacit approval of the president and or his White House really strains credulity here.
All right, let me ask them, Pam, you read this letter. Susan Rice's email she's sending to herself in the waning hours of the Obama administration. How do you interpret it? My interpretation is CYA.
Of course it is. Of course that's what it is. And to say that the president of the United States, Barack Obama, didn't know what was going on is ludicrous. And that's why Monica's brilliant op-ed made so much sense. The fundamental transformation of a nation, that's what then candidate Obama wanted to do to our country. Now it's CYA by all of them. He wanted Hillary elected so he could not only protect his liberal agenda, but also to protect himself from everything that the country would find out that he had done.
I don't think one email on the last day is going to cover up all of this. It's a good shot, but I don't think it's going to happen. All right, good to see you all. We appreciate your hard work. When we come back, Ed Henry back with an update on how D.C. is reacting to all the news tonight and more. Straight ahead tonight on Hannity. All right, joining us now with more on all of today's big stories, Fox News chief national correspondent Ed Henry. As I watch everything that's going on, this is your territory, and you've got to be fair, balanced, and objective, and I don't, which is really, really good. You know, I'm watching everything as it relates to, we now are learning a lot about 2016 that we never saw before.
Yeah,
and I know
no
it's
doubt
a battle of the release of the memos.
Yeah.
But I think the evidence is pretty incontrovertible that something wrong happened when you exonerate before investigate. I think any American would say that probably doesn't happen too often to them. And then now that we know there's two Russia stories that the media never talked about, one involves Hillary Clinton paying for the Russian dossier, and the other one involves the uranium one and the fact that she signed off on the CFIUS deal. Yeah. Where's your media colleagues on these stories?
People are AWOL right now, Sean, and I think what's remarkable is that Devin Nunes got so beaten up by the mainstream media for putting out a memo that in the end did not compromise sources and methods, as many people in the media predicted, because they were listening to John Brennan and all of these national security experts, mostly from the Obama administration, tied to the old Clinton administration or the Clinton campaign, saying that this was going to reveal sources and methods. It did nothing like that. What it did was name names, yes, but made a fundamental point that, in fact, the FISA court judge and judges, since there were multiple FISA applications, it was not disclosed to them that, in fact, the Clinton campaign and the DNC had paid for that dossier, which was a key part of getting the surveillance and spying of Trump advisor Carter Page. So the very bottom line is, yes, Democrats are entitled to get their memo out as well. And the president says the only reason he's blocking it right now is that there is classified information that he wants pulled back. So if the Democrats go back to the drawing board and reshape their version of the memo, we're told by lawmakers who have seen the Democratic memo, it does not dispute that fundamental point we were just talking about, that the FISA court judges were not told that the DNC and the Clinton campaign paid for the dossier. Even the Democratic memo does not dispute that.
You know, and the thing is, if you look at the timeline, remember, there was an earlier attempt that was denied as it relates to a FISA warrant. That was July. Mm-hmm. But when you go to the October FISA application, you're right. It was unverified. a footnote that says it may be political in nature does not mean it came from the Clinton campaign and the DNC.
Correct.
That was withheld, but it was known and it was withheld. But here's the irony to me is that James Comey, this is in October, he's arguing that this should go before the FISA. He knows it's going before the FISA court. It's the bulk of information, according to the Grassley-Graham memo.
Yeah.
But then in January, when he goes to see Trump at Trump Tower, he's still the president-elect before the swearing in. He's telling Trump it's unverified and salacious.
Right.
3 months earlier, he's saying something different.
Two important points there, Sean, from a reporting aspect, which is you're right. Number one, James Comey is telling the president-elect at Trump Tower, January 2017, this dossier is unverified, even though if you rewind the tape, as you say, back in October 2016, the FISA court judge, it's not made clear that it's unverified. Instead, they suggested that the FBI had verified at least parts of this. And the other important point about the dossier is that it's not clear that President-elect Trump was told, in fact, we believe he was not told, that the dossier was paid for by the DNC and the Clinton camp, even though James Comey clearly knew that.
I'm trying to wrap my arms around this. If it's not verified and it's used as the bulk of information, I would think that if Donald Trump, if he had paid for this dossier and it was full of Russian propaganda, and it was used on a FISA court to get a warrant on anybody in the Clinton campaign, that the same media that's silent here or missing in action, as you say, they would be apoplectic about this.
They would be if the shoe was going to be on the other foot. I think here's the real test. When and if we finally see this Democratic memo, if some more redactions are made, maybe there's more points that the Democrats can make in there. Maybe they will be able to challenge some of the facts you just laid out. We simply do not know because we have not seen the Democratic memo. But again, to this point, they have not challenged that fundamental point that the FISA court seems to have been misled. Again, as a reporter, if the Democratic memo has something we don't know today, we have to be fair and balanced and say, okay, here's another piece of information. Maybe the FISA court judges were told something beyond the dossier to give them the confidence that it was verified. At this moment, we don't have that.
Thanks, Ed, for that update. When we come back, a big, huge anniversary for a conspiracy theorist, MSNBC's Chris Matthews. It's kind of a good way. It's our video of the day in the Hannity Hotline. Straight ahead.